Thanks for joining us for our penultimate Azure Skill Up webinar. I'm Joe Kozlowitz. I'm on the marketing team here at Lunavi. Our presentation and demos today will cover Azure Security Center. I know Aman has a lot of ground to cover, so I'll get out of his way quickly. I just wanted to let everyone know first that we are recording this session, so if we go long or if you need to drop early, you'll also receive a recording link via email. We do encourage interaction. Make sure that Aman addresses everything that comes up. We'll also have some time at the end for Q&A. A really quick rundown on Lunavi, just in case you haven't worked with us before. We are a customer service focused provider of managed IT infrastructure, consulting, and cloud native application development. As a Microsoft Gold Partner and Azure Expert MSP, we have deep ties to the Microsoft and Azure ecosystems. If you have any upcoming IT projects like a cloud migration, app refactoring for the cloud, or data center modernization, we are a great resource for you. Finally, don't forget to sign up for our final session if you haven't already done so. The link is on your screen, and I'll also drop it in the chat as well. Today's presenter is Aman Sharma. He is a principal consultant with us here at Lunavi and a former Microsoft employee. Has deep experience in cloud optimization, management, and automation. He's been working with Azure for over 10 years. Five-time Microsoft MVP and has presented all over the place. So be sure to give him a follow and reach out to either of us directly if you happen to have any questions after the call as well. So that's all for me. I'll hand things off to Aman to get the meat going.
Thanks a lot, Joe. Can you hear me and see my screen?
We can.
Perfect. And feel free to interject in between or post your questions in the chat window. I'll be taking a look at that periodically. The agenda for today's session is looking at how to securing your environment, leveraging Azure Security Center. We'll be looking at the introduction, why we are talking about Security Center, what Security Center is. Then we'll delve deep into leveraging the Security Center, the first aspect of it, which includes secure score and looking at recommendations and how to remediate those recommendations. And then diving into Azure Defender, the paid offering in the Security Center. We'll look at various settings and integrations as well. So let's dive right in. So why is Security Center important? Why is our topic for today very important and crucial to your infrastructure, to your organization? There has been increase in number of attacks. The attackers are now getting smarter and sophisticated. Microsoft reported that 95% increase in the cost of breach was seen in just in 2019. On an average, every customer end up paying 5.16 million in terms of the cost of the breach. We need to reduce the response time. When a breach occurs, we need to ensure that we can respond to the breach in a timely fashion. Microsoft states that 68% breaches take months or even longer to discover. We also need visibility into the security posture so that we are not only being reactive, we are also being proactive. We are trying to prevent the breaches in the first place, not always going into the reactive fashion. If your company is following some compliance, for example, a NIST compliance or some other regulatory standard, then you want to ensure that you follow that. If there are audit reports, you are compliant all the time. If you are not, then which portion needs to be corrected? You want visibility into the security posture and the compliance. And to solve all this, the solution is Security Center. Security Center focuses on two broad pillars of cloud security. Whenever you will talk about cloud security in any conversation, two broad pillars are always brought up. One is CSPM, which is your cloud security posture management, and another one is your workload protection or cloud workload protection, CWP. Azure Security Center helps you strengthen the security posture. It provides you with secure score. It leverages Azure policies behind the scene and makes you compliant. It gives you recommendations to increase your score, to rectify if there are any shortcomings from security perspective in your environment. And every environment is unique. if some recommendation does not apply to your environment, we will see how we can ignore those or exempt ourselves from those recommendations. On the other side of the things, when it comes to CWP or cloud workload protection, Security Center protects us against threats. It leverages Azure Defender offering from Microsoft for workloads, that is your VMs running in Azure on premises or in other clouds like AWS or GCP. It also works with cloud native workloads, for example, your Kubernetes service, your container registry, etc. It even works with other PaaS services, that is your platform services, which we'll see as we progress in this presentation. It works for databases and storage, etc. Key points that I want you to understand about Security Center are: it assesses the security state of all your cloud resources. There is a separate section for Security Center, yes, but there is also security integrated into each and every resources. We'll see that during our demo section. It works not only with infrastructure as a service services, that is your IaaS services, your virtual machines, your virtual network, your network security groups, etc. It also works with platform as a service, your app services, storage account, etc. Workloads can be running in Azure, on premises, or even in other cloud. You can now onboard AWS and GCP workloads right into Security Center. You can visualize the security state of your environment in a single go, leveraging Secure Score. You will be also able to view the compliance against any regulatory requirements that we'll see down during our demo as well. It's an ongoing assessment. There is something called freshness interval for everything. Some assessment is done once every 24 hours, whereas other assessment, the most critical ones, they are done once every 30 minutes, for example. There is a freshness interval defined for everything. We'll take a look during the demos part. All the insights that you get through Security Center, they have actionable recommended steps. Those could be either manual or automated, but you get actionable insights. You get different reports on the Security Center recommendations and even security alerts, etc. You have two options when we are talking about Security Center. The first one that we saw earlier, if I go back to the previous slide, the left-hand side, strengthening your security posture. This is free, available out of the box. The right-hand side is the paid option. We look at that, how much it's going to cost you when we look at Azure Defender. Before we jump into the demo, let's look at two concepts. The first concept is about Secure Score. Secure Score is the representation of your overall security posture. It is one number that determines overall in your whole environment, how secure is your environment. It gives you a glimpse into the current posture, and it also tells you what is the area for improvement and where those areas lie. Higher the score, it's better for your security. You want the secure score to be as higher as possible. Now, Security Center, along with the secure score, provides you with recommendation and remediation steps for those recommendations. Now, these recommendations are grouped into something called security controls. If you have worked with any of the regulatory standards, for example, the ISO 27001 or NIST framework or CIS framework, you know that there are security controls that you follow when you are following a particular standard. The Microsoft Security Center mimics that when it is giving you recommendations. There is something called security controls. It is a logical grouping of related security recommendations. So this grouping you see, and then you see the recommendations for that particular group. If you want to enhance your score, you have to follow all the recommendations for a particular security control. For example, encrypting data in transit, that is one security control. Within that, there can be multiple items. For example, for your storage accounts, you need to secure the transfer. For your other workloads, you need to enable a particular version for TLS, for example. Now, each recommendation has a different impact on score. This is always provider, and you have complete visibility that which recommendations you want to prioritize. If a certain recommendation does not apply to your case, to your environment, you can ignore that. You can create an exemption for that recommendation that we'll see during the demo. Most of the recommendations are policy driven. If you have worked with Azure policy, when we'll look at the demo, it will make much more sense. Behind the scene, the whole Azure Security Center, most of the things are policy driven. It audits your whole environment and then gives you reports on which environment are not adhering to that policy, thereby giving you recommendation on those resources. Every recommendation has one of the three severity: high, medium, low, depending upon its impact to the security of your infrastructure. And as we discussed earlier, it also has a freshness interval. If you fix a recommendation, then if the recommendation has a 24-hour freshness interval, then your score will be updated based on that particular freshness interval. The interval ranges from 30 minutes to 24 hours, and sometimes in between that range. We will look at this when we are looking at actual recommendations. When you have recommendations, you want to remediate those. You want to ensure that you make your environment more secure based on the recommendations that you have received. You have two types of fixes that you can leverage. One is the manual fix, another one is automated fix. At both of the places, Azure Security Center assists you. For the manual fixes, it provides you with detailed documentation, links, and detailed steps, how you can remediate those. For automated fixes, it's even much more easier. You get the button to fix it automatically from within the portal, from within the Security Center. You select your resources for which you want to fix it, and then the policy, the automation, it works behind the scene to fix that, depending upon what kind of recommendation is and what kind of fix is required. Other option for each and every recommendation, as we discussed, is you can exempt the resources from a policy. When you are exempting a resource from a policy, you have two options. You can either say that you have mitigated this using a third-party solution. You are not leveraging Microsoft solution for each and everything. That is fine. Each and every customer is different. Microsoft factors that into Security Center. So they give you the option that this has been mitigated, but this has been mitigated by a third-party solution. Or you can create a waiver. Waiver means you understand the risks of that particular recommendation, but you agree to those risks and you are ready to take on those risks. Some of the requirements may be what you require. For example, encrypting data in transit. For something, you may want to not do that, although that is not a good example, but you can raise a waiver. And then another option is to deny resource creation unless it meets your policy. So for any recommendation, if you consider that recommendation as a very strict policy at your organization, you can select that not only audit the resources and report on those, but in fact, for any new resources, deny the resource creation. We'll see that in the demo. So before we jump into the Defender, let's switch to the Azure portal. Here I'm logged into the Azure portal. I can select the Security Center from the recent services since I opened it. You won't have this opened or available over here. Instead, the best option is click on the search bar at top and start typing security. As you will start typing that, you will have all these options. From these options, you select the Security Center. Now in here, once the Security Center loads, you have various options in the overview page as well. It shows you your inventory right up above. It shows you that you have one Azure subscription. There are 74 resources in my subscription that were assessed against different security policies. There are 40 active recommendations and there are 5 security alerts right now active. The secure score that we were talking about is presented here on the overview page as well. It gives you a quick glimpse into how secure your environment is. Right now, this environment is standing at only 16% secure. There are multiple recommendations that I need to adhere to before I can increase my secure score. There are 46 unhealthy resources out of 74 assessed. We will delve deep into the secure score in a short while. From the regulatory compliance, it shows me the different compliances. We will look at those when we'll talk about Azure Defender. And then on the right-hand side, it gives me insights into what are the most prevalent recommendations. This particular recommendation, I have to apply this to most number of resources, for example. And then at the bottom, it shows me the controls with highest potential increase to these are the recommendations which affect my secure score mostly. This has the most potential of increasing my security, increasing the secure score overall. At the bottom, I have Azure Defender. It shows me whether there are any alerts. It shows me how many workloads are there and for the alerts, how many are high, medium, and low alerts in my environment. It also gives me resource coverage. If I have, for example, 4 virtual machines, how many are covered via Azure Defender. There is a firewall manager which protects your network. We won't be covering firewall manager in today's session, but this is also there in the security center. Now, to proceed ahead, we will look at the score first. Score is available under cloud security as the first option. At the top, it gives me a glimpse into that my overall score is 16%. That means my overall security posture is very low. It's sitting at 16%. It's roughly 9 points out of 56 total points that can be applied to my environment. If I hover on that, it gives me precise points. That is a rounded off figure. My precise points are 9.04. And then I can click on view recommendations to see how I can improve this score. Subscription with the lowest score, I only have one. That's why it is showing me that subscription. If you have multiple subscriptions under your AD tenant that you are managing via Security Center, then you will see all of those. There is Secure Score API and some resources that are shown here. You can even integrate it with Power BI through the community app that somebody has created. Down below, it shows me what I have onboarded into Security Center. This is my subscription with the score of 16%, unhealthy resources 13 out of 34 total resources. Now, the second section we want to visit is the recommendations. To improve the secure score, we need to look at the recommendations. The recommendation section itself also gives me this secure score. It shows me how many recommendations out of the total 44 I have completed. And then it shows me the health of the resources, how many are healthy, how many are not applicable, and how many are sitting in the danger zone, that is the unhealthy territory. And then completed controls, which controls are completely fulfilled. Controls is the category that we talked about, secure controls. And then each control have multiple recommendations. And where those controls are, down below. So all of these categories, which are all collapsed right now, these are all security controls. Enabling MFA is a security control. We were talking about this, encrypt data in transit. This is one security control. And if I expand anything, it has multiple recommendations underneath. So right now, this particular encrypt data in transit, it has 4 recommendations underneath. Now, what is the order in which these are provided? By default, they are provided in what is the max score, what is the current score, and where is the potential increase. Potential increase is what it is sorted by. So enabling multi-factor authentication has the most impact on your subscription. It has 10 points dedicated to it, and potential score increase 18%. Right now, I'm sitting at 0%. For example, for this one, secure management ports, max score is 8. I have current score of 2, and if I follow all the recommendations under this security control, I have potential score increase of 11%. That is 6 points out of 8 that I have not covered so far. Under unhealthy resources, it gives me the number of unhealthy resources for this particular control. I have 4 resources that are applicable to this particular control. 3 out of the 4 resources are unhealthy. Let's expand that and see. You can expand this column. And you can see that internet-facing virtual machines should be protected with network security groups. 1 out of 4 virtual machine is unhealthy. That means 3 virtual machines have network security groups applied to them, whereas 1 virtual machine out of the 4 does not have any network security group applied on it. Management ports should be closed on your virtual machine. It's only done on 2. It's not available on the other 2. And by the way, if you are looking at the recommendation and you cannot read it, just hover your mouse on top of it and you get the tooltip with the complete name of the recommendation. For example, this one is management ports of virtual machines should be protected with just-in-time network access control. 2 virtual machines are showing as healthy out of 4. And in fact, if you see on the right hand side, actually 1 is not applicable. This is the one that does not have NSG. 1 is healthy, on which just-in-time access is enabled, and 2 VMs are unhealthy, for which we can configure just-in-time VM access, but that is not enabled. What is just-in-time VM access? We'll look at that shortly when we'll talk about Azure Defender. Now let's take a look at a couple more recommendations. Encrypt data in transit. So one thing I want you to notice is in here, there are 2 types of recommendations. The one which have this bookmark kind of symbol in front of those and one which does not. So if you hover your mouse over that, it says this is a preview recommendation. This recommendation won't affect your score until it goes GA. That is, until it becomes generally available. It won't affect your security score that you get in the security center. So it's a good practice that you start incorporating this in your environment. Start remediating this particular recommendation if there are unhealthy resources. For example, in my case, I have one web application that is unhealthy, so that later on when it becomes added to and starts affecting your score, you will not be affected. You will be sitting at a higher score because of this. Now let's look at this particular recommendation. Secure transfer to storage account should be enabled. Now in here, it shows me that the severity is high. This is what we were talking about during the presentation section, that every recommendation has a severity. For this particular recommendation, the severity is high. There is also freshness interval. That means how frequently it checks for this particular condition that the secure transfer to storage account is enabled or not. At the bottom, it shows me unhealthy resources. It shows me the healthy resources for which the setting is already applied, and not applicable resources. There are no not applicable resources for this particular recommendation. We'll switch back to unhealthy resources. Now, I'll copy this, and in second tab, I'll search for that particular resource. I'll navigate to that resource. Now I have 2 options. One, I can navigate to configurations. In here, this is the secure transfer required. This is the setting that policy in Azure Security Center is looking at. Right now, this is sitting at disabled. I can either enable it from here, or I don't even need to open my resource. When I'm in the Security Center, I can select my resource. I can click on fix. And then over here, I can it gives me that this section updates your security, the storage account security to only allow requests by secure connection, that is HTTPS. Any request using HTTP will be rejected, and gives you additional information about the fix that will be implemented. I click on fix one resource. It says remediation in process. After a short while, it says remediation successful. I navigate back to the storage account. Hit refresh. You see behind the scene, all it did was it updated the setting for this resource to enabled. Now, other thing we talked about is that now the freshness interval. The freshness interval for this particular policy is sitting at 30 minutes. This one is showing as disabled, but soon it will refresh and your secure score will also update. You can also exempt the resources as we talked about earlier. So for example, this particular resource, I do not want to apply the fix, although it is always recommended. I can't think of a scenario you should not be using HTTPS. But for the demo's sake, let's assume that you want to exempt that for this particular storage account. What you can do is you can select the resource and click on exempt. And then, in fact, you don't even need to click on resource. You can directly click exempt, and then you can exempt this particular policy directly at the subscription level or at the resource level. When you select selected resources radio button, you can click on the drop down. And in here, it will show you the remaining unhealthy resources. As I said earlier, this resource is also being shown right now because the freshness interval hasn't triggered yet. We just now applied the fix. So I can select the other resource, and for that particular resource, I can create the exemption. I can set an expiration date for the exemption. As you can see, I still don't see the create button because exemption category and exemption description is a mandatory field. Exemption category is either mitigator or waiver that we discussed in the presentation. Mitigator means that you resolved it through a third-party service. You can say that mitigator via, and you can provide a name of the third-party solution. Or you can select waiver. Waiver means you accept the risk, and then you know that, okay, you need to accept that there can be a risk, there can be something malicious that end user can do because HTTPS is not enforced. Let's stick to mitigator for now. And for expiration date, let's give it tomorrow's expiration date so that I'll again get this policy. You can set it to 1 month or 1 year or whatever time you require, and then hit create. An exemption will be created. And then you see that even the second storage account that is also now showing as disabled. You can't take any more action. During the next freshness interval, it will show that all the resources are healthy for this particular policy. Any questions so far in what we have seen? If you have any questions, feel free to post those in the chat window. All right, let's take a look at a couple other recommendations. So if I scroll down here and I navigate to, let's look at this one, enable endpoint protection. So let's look at this one. Log Analytics agent should be installed on your virtual machine. Now this is another resource. It also has severity high, but the freshness interval is different from the earlier one that we saw. The freshness interval is 24 hours. At the bottom, I'll see the resources, and even for this one, I can click on fix. The experience is different. What it is doing is it is installing Log Analytics agent. You can select a workspace, and then for the selected resources, it will install that Log Analytics agent on the VM. Another thing that we did not saw earlier was this remediation steps. Remediation steps gives you more details and gives you links to the documentation on what this fix is doing. If an automated fix won't be available, then remediation steps will give you exact details into what needs to be done step by step. Let's go back. So in here, the second recommendation is install endpoint protection solution on your virtual machines. Now this is a different kind of recommendation. You see there is no policy. The GUI is entirely different. Now this one, it says that endpoint protection is not installed and it only gives you the remediation step. That is, you can install it on 4 VMs. You cannot disable it from here. There is another location from where you can disable it. We will look at that during the settings section. Now, last thing I want you to see is how all these recommendations are being applied. What is happening under the hood? Now, that is one of the things that very few people will show you when you are learning about Security Center. So let's take one. Let's take this particular recommendation, for example, secure transfer to storage account should be enabled. Now, how is this being pushed? What is happening under the hood? So if I navigate to the recommendation, you see it says view policy definition. It even gives me query, which is the Kusto query I can leverage to run analysis or pull different kind of reports based on this particular policy. This gives me one hint that, okay, behind the scene, it is leveraging Azure policies. In the second tab, what I'll do is I'll navigate to Azure policies by typing policy in the search bar and selecting policy. Now in here, I'll look at assignments for my subscription. There are various assignments, but this secure transfer to storage account, that policy assignment is nowhere here. Instead, where that is located is, if I filter this by alphabetical order, ASC default. Now, this is not a policy. This is an initiative. Within Azure policy, an initiative is nothing but a group of multiple policies that you have created. Now, this ASC default, that is Azure Security Center default, you click on this one. And then you click on view definition. Once it loads, you will be able to see all the policies that Azure Security Center applies. At the bottom, you can see these are all the policies that Azure Security Center applies. I can filter it by alphabetical order, and then I'll navigate to letter S. And then this is the policy right here. Secure transfer to storage account should be enabled. You see, this is word to word same if you see on the left hand side. So Azure Security Center is doing nothing but behind the scene, it is leveraging Azure policy. It has all these sets of policies, and all these policies translate into your recommendations. Now, instead of looking at the policy definitions, I'll cross out of that. You can edit the assignment. And during the editing the assignment, you can navigate to parameters. And you can uncheck this only show parameters that require input. Basically, this checkbox means if there is a default value, don't show me that parameter. After I uncheck this, give it a couple of minutes, and then it will show you all the policies. Let's search for the policy that we are looking at. So this is the policy. Secure transfer to storage account should be enabled. Now, this particular policy, the default behavior is audit. When you select deny from the portal, from the Security Center, it actually switches this particular parameter for the policy. And when you can, if you don't need this policy in your environment, you can disable this right here. And by the way, you don't even need to remember from where you do that. There is a setting within Azure Security Center that will bring you in here in this particular Azure policy section. We'll see that in the settings demo. That's all about recommendations and score. This is your security posture management solution from the Security Center, and this is available out of the box. This is free solution from Microsoft. Let's switch back to the presentation. Let's talk about the paid offering that Microsoft has inbuilt into Security Center, which is Azure Defender. Azure Defender detects and blocks your threats. It provides your enhanced threat protection. It provides you with XDR, which is your extended detection and response management system. It protects not only your workloads, that is your virtual machines, it protects your data, storage, and cloud native services like Azure Container Services or Azure Kubernetes services, etc. It has built-in vulnerability assessment. You need to onboard your workloads by installing an agent, but after that, it has out-of-the-box built-in vulnerability assessment. When we'll go into the portal in our second demo, you will see that enabling this option is relatively very easy. By default, this is the option on the left-hand side that is selected, Azure Defender off. And continuous assessment and security recommendations, Azure Secure Score, that is included without Azure Defender. When you have Azure Defender on, you get both of those. In addition, you get much more advanced features like just-in-time VM access, adaptive application controls, etc. And when you are enabling that, you can pick and choose. If you don't want to enable it for other services, you only want to enable it, let's say, for your VMs and let's say storage account, you can do that. We'll look at that when we are going through the demo. In here, it also gives you the option to look at the pricing. For your VMs, the pricing will be $15 per server per month, but you will be billed only for the running instances. For the duration when the instances are not running, you will not be billed. Let's look at some of the key points for Azure Defender. It provides you with vulnerability assessment. It provides you with just-in-time VM access. All these are the advanced protection controls that you have. We'll look at these in the demo directly in the portal. There are various industry and regulatory standards that you get reports on, and you can enhance those via Azure Security Center. The out-of-the-box controls are Azure Security Benchmark, the default ISO 27001 standard, which is a legacy standard. It will soon be replaced with this one. You can manually onboard this ISO 27001:2013, PCI SOC compliance, Azure CIS, the latest version being 1.3.0, and you have the ability to add many more. We'll see how you can do that. You can get audit reports on these regulatory standards. You can view compliance over time as well. These are all the standards on the right-hand side that you can onboard. There are various settings as well, which we'll look at after we come back from the demo. Let's first look at the Azure Defender, how you can enable it. To enable it, scroll down to Management, navigate to Pricing and Settings. Select at the level at which you want to enable Azure Defender. I'll select the subscription, for example. The very first setting is to enable Azure Defender plans. This is what I had in the slide that we just took a look at. On the left-hand side is when you have Azure Defender off. On the right-hand side, you just click here on this big box, and then you scroll down. You either have the option to enable all, or you can pick and choose. You can disable it for a particular service. And then once you have done making your selections, hit save at the top, and your selections will be saved. While we are here, let's look at a few of the other settings. The second one is auto provisioning. So these 4 items which enable Azure Security Center, log analytics agent for Azure VMs, Microsoft dependency agent, which is currently in preview, policy add-on for Kubernetes, guest configuration agent. You can enable all these extensions for the Security Center, which adds more insights, more data to the Security Center to be able to provide you better insights. You can auto provision all this. Right now, I have log analytics agent for Azure VMs auto provisioned so that if I create a new VM, log analytics agent will be auto deployed for me. You also have the option to email the recipients. If there is any alert, you can email a particular set of users. One option is you can select that all the owners or account admins, or let's say only account admins and service admins should be sent an email when I'll select this checkbox when there is a high severity alert, or you can provide email ID is over here, which should be comma separated. I recommend that you leverage distribution lists within your organization and add and remove people as they come and go. And this distribution list should be the people who should be able to take action. By default, when you don't have anything selected, you will be provided notification for everything. When you select, what you are selecting is, for example, if I selected medium, so you will not only be provided alerts or notifications for medium level alerts, but also anything medium and higher. And since the high alerts are most critical, you want to be notified for those more frequently. You get at least one email for every 6 hours for high severity alerts, and then one email per 12 hours for medium, and one email per 24 hours for low severity alerts. So right now we'll discard all these changes and proceed to the next setting. Next setting is enabling the integration. The integration is with Microsoft's CASB solution, which is Cloud App Security, and also with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. These can access your data by enabling this particular integration. You can even enable CI/CD. If you have DevOps pipelines, you can enable the CI/CD pipelines vulnerability scanning directly from here. You have something called workflow automation. We'll look at that briefly from a different section. It is available under settings. There is a dedicated section in Security Center for that. If you want a continuous export of your security recommendations, for example, you can do that. You can export it to Event Hub or Log Analytics Workspace. Through Event Hub, you can integrate it with third-party CMs. You select that you want the export to be enabled, and then you select what kind of data you want to export. You want to export security recommendations, which criticality you want to be exported. For example, I can say that only high severity criticality recommendations should be exported. For secure score as well, you can have all the controls exported. Security alerts, regulatory compliance are the other ones that you can export as well. You have two options for export frequency. You have snapshots, which happens at a frequent intervals, or you have streaming updates. Streaming updates is what I would recommend, since it is as it happens, especially for higher criticality alerts. Export configuration, the configuration itself will be stored somewhere in this resource group that you can select over here. But this configuration is just only metadata. Your export data will actually be going in here. This is the target, which will be saving your exported configurations. You select a subscription, event hub, event name, and a policy name within the event hub. And then down below, you can see that Microsoft provides you with the links, how you can leverage the data from event hubs and integrate with third-party CMs or connect selected event hub to Azure Data Explorer. On the other hand, instead of Event Hub, if you selected Log Analytics Workspace, you can export similar type of data, similar frequency settings, similar export configuration setting, but the target instead is a Log Analytics Workspace. Now it says that saving data to Log Analytics Workspace, similar to Event Hub as well, it incurs ingestion charges. Now, when you integrate with the Log Analytics, you can integrate this with Azure Monitor alerts so that you can monitor all the alerts, including the security alerts from Defender, right from within Azure Monitor. The last option I want you to take a look at is Cloud Connectors. So in here, you can have a connection to AWS account and GCP account as well. Right now, these buttons are disabled because I fiddled with the Azure Defender. This setting requires Azure Defender to be on. That's why these buttons are disabled right now. Let's go back. Now that we have looked, the primary setting that we enabled is your Azure Defender. Now, once you have done this, you get advanced threat protection through Azure Defender that you can find under Cloud Security under Azure Defender. So in here, it is showing me that I have fully covered resources as there are total 18 resources. 83.3% out of those, that is 15 resources, are fully covered. 3 resources are not covered. There are 4 servers, 1 app service, 1 key vault, 1 database server, 6 storage accounts, resource manager subscription, DNS subscription, etc. These are all the 15 resources that, the 18 resources that this is talking about. These are the 15 resources which are covered that this thing is talking about. Then any alerts you can see over here. High severity, there are 3 alerts, medium severity, 2 alerts, low severity, 0 alerts. Advanced protection that we were talking about, that is available down below. Each one of those used to be a separate section over here on the left-hand side. Now they have been packaged into Azure Defender. VM vulnerability assessment is listed here. If I click on it, we need to onboard these servers. These servers are not onboarded. The vulnerability assessment solution has not been deployed for these VMs. Once I deploy this, it will give me enhanced vulnerability assessment for all the VMs. I can even exempt myself for any assessment control if I need. Just-in-time VM access, it gives you capability to enable RDP connection, for example, to your VM only when it is required. So right now, 1 VM has this control enabled. 2 VMs does not have this control enabled. 1 VM is unsupported as it does not have any network security group. Just-in-time VM access behind the scene, it leverages network security groups. When you say, OK, now I need RDP connection to my VM for next 2 hours, for example, it opens the RDP port via your network security group. How does the configuration wizard looks like? You just select the VM, click on enable JIT on 1 VM, and then select the setting. What is the time range? You want to leave it at default. You can even modify this, that the max time range can be, let's say, 15 hours. And then you can hit save. It will apply the JIT configurations for this particular VM. Behind the scene, it will control the network security group. Now, if I go back, I already have it configured on 1 VM. I can select the VM, and then I can select request access. And then I'll say it is off for everything. I only need access on RDP port, which is 3389. And I need access only for my IP. When I'm visiting the portal knows from the IP address from where I'm connected to this particular portal. I can even specify an IP range. Star means all the IPs will be allowed access, which is not a best practice, but for testing could be something that you may want. And then you can say that, OK, the max limit that you set for any value less than that, you can say that, OK, I want access only on 3389, only for 2 hours, and I can select, click on open ports. It will open the port that is 3389 only for 2 hours on this VM. Other controls are adaptive application control, through which you allow only particular set of applications to be installed on your workloads. Container image scanning, adaptive network hardening to better protect your networks. SQL vulnerability assessment to see if there is a vulnerability for SQL injection, for example. Anomalous logins is another one that it checks for, etc. File integrity monitoring, you can tell it that on these workloads, these files, I want to monitor its file integrity. If there are any changes inside the VM for a particular set of files, those should be tracked. And if need be, I will be able to audit who made what changes. Network map, it gives me a visual representation of what all virtual networks I have, what all subnets are there. For example, this is one virtual network. There is this subnet on that particular virtual network and only 1 VM assigned to that particular subnet. It gives me a pictorial representation of my whole networking in my subscription. And then IoT security for your Internet of Things. Last thing related to Azure Defender I want to talk about is regulatory compliance. Now, this is where it gives you insights into how compliant are you when compared to these particular standards. If I scroll down, there are all these tabs. Instead of looking at the default, which is Azure Security Benchmark, we can look at ISO 27001, for example. It says that this is the legacy implementation, will soon be removed from the compliance dashboard. 27001 colon 2013 is the latest one that we are interested in. And when you scroll down, let's say we have not enabled this particular control. That is the compliance control I need to adhere to if I'm compliant with this particular standard. I can keep on expanding and digging down, and you can see that, okay, these are all the policies, all the recommendations that I need to follow to ensure that I am compliant with this particular cryptography requirements. For the recommendation for which there is a quick fix, it will give me that option as this button. It says that automated remediation is available. So this experience is similar to what we saw during the recommendation section. It's just presented in a way so that you can look at the security controls for particular regulatory compliances, and then you can adhere to those as well. Now, another part I want to take a look at is security policy. Security policy is how you add or remove the policies to the default one, and also you add the regulatory compliances. So you select the subscription, and then within the subscription you have three options. The first one is Security Center default policy. You click here. It takes you to the ASC default policy. This is the one that we opened from the other tab from Azure policy section. This is exactly that one. And you can navigate to parameters, uncheck this checkbox, and then enable or disable any of the policy in here. For example, this log agent analytics agent, this one, log analytics agent should be installed on your virtual machine. Right now it is only auditing. You can disable this policy as well. I can navigate back to security policy. Now down below is where industry and regulatory standards are listed. It will show me which are the ones that are out of the box, which are the ones that I have added. You can click on add more standards. These are the ones that are available. If you want to add any standard, just click on the add button. It will onboard that particular standard. Behind the scene, it is just deploying a policy into Azure policies, which will audit for all the controls for this particular standard. And in fact, let me correct, it deploys an initiative corresponding to this particular standard. At the bottom, you can add your custom initiatives, any custom set of policy definitions that you want to get recommendations directly from Security Center. You can add those custom initiatives right here. Let's switch back to presentation. We covered a lot of ground. We talked about Azure Defender and regulatory compliances. We talked about different settings as well. Let's look at what we saw in the demo. We saw that Azure Security Center is leveraging security policy. There is an option for auto provisioning under settings. You can auto provision all these four extensions. There are various other settings that we went through: email notifications, integrations, continuous export, cloud connectors, etc. We looked at security policies. We looked at how to modify the default behavior, how we can disable or enable a policy, how we can enable or disable a regulatory standard, and we can also add our custom initiatives. There are various other integrations as well. You can integrate Security Center with Azure Sentinel. You can have third-party integrations with different CM source ITSMs. CM is your security information and event management. Azure Sentinel is Microsoft CM. Security orchestration automated response is another thing. For example, in fact, Azure Sentinel also does SOAR, that is orchestrated automated response. ITSM is your service management, for example, ServiceNow. You can integrate with Azure Monitor Alerts that we saw earlier as well. Third-party integration is through Event Hub. monitoring alerts is through Log Analytics Workspace. We are short on time, but one option I want you to know about is workflow automation. Workflow automation is if an alert is triggered within the security center, you can take automated actions, and those actions are taken via logic apps. All you do is you provide a name. For example, you say all alerts demo. You select the subscription and a resource group. Resource group is where this setting would reside. And then the trigger condition, that the threat detection alerts or security recommendation, etc., which one you want. You select that. Alert name contains, if you leave it default, all alerts will be considered. If I only want log on once, then I can say all log on alerts, and the alert name contains log on. Alert severity, I can say that only medium and high should be included. And then if this occurs, invoke this particular logic app, and you can have a logic app take multiple automated actions. For example, the logic app can send automated emails or even can remediate your alert. You click on create, and it creates the workflow automation for me, that glue between the logic app and security center for me. Finally, I have some references over here. These are the links you can take a snapshot that I feel are much more helpful in continuing your journey towards learning Azure Security Center and doing deep dive into this. There are various topics, various in-depth walkthroughs that we couldn't get to during this session. For example, working with alerts, etc. We will be taking those up in our channel in detailed walkthroughs. If you have any questions, we are right at top of the hour. If you have any questions, feel free to paste those in the chat window or send those across, and I'll be happy to answer those. And with that, if there are no questions, Joe, I send this back to you.
Thanks, Aman. Great stuff. Thanks, everybody, for jumping on the call today. As I mentioned, I will be sending out a recording, and we have one more session next week that I believe will be covering Azure architecture using design patterns. So if you have some more Azure learning to do, be sure to tune in for that one. And if you think of any questions after the fact, you should have my email address, so go ahead and shoot them my way or reach out to Aman on social media or via email as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Good
Thanks,
presentation.
Everyone. Thanks, Brett.